All right, welcome to the Q7a walkthrough. This quiz is going to be a little bit different than most. It's actually covering a couple topics that we're not going to get to until Module 9 of the class. So if you do this quiz and just get like 3/4 through it and get a score greater than 5, I'm going to add 5 to everybody's score in the gradebook that got to the point where they got at least a 5 on it. So if you don't feel like doing the last solver bit, don't sweat it. I'll take care of you this time. All right, so let's get started. All right, so we open the file, enable editing. Now let's start doing this. There should be 3 conditional rules, top 2, bottom 2, and icon set rule. Delete all extra rules. Let me hide the instructions. I'm going to need the full screen here today. So come up here, enable conditional formatting for this entire worksheet. And then we've got several in here that we only want the first 3. So delete everything other than these first 3. So bottom 2, top 2, icon set. All right, we now have 3 rules here. Looks like the cell ranges are a little wrong, so I'm going to come in here and change it. Instead of 8 to 10, it's 5 to 20. So I'm going to highlight that one, copy it, Control C, and then come in here and paste Control V, Control V. And the next step says if bottom 2 is true, then click the little stop icon, click the little checkbox here for those 2 things. Hit apply, hit OK. All right, next step. Now that the conditional formatting's done, let's sort this. So there's a couple different ways you can sort things, and we're going to do both this quiz. So you can click on this filter, which we'll do later, but you can also just click on this sort function. So now what do we want to do? Make sure my data has headers box is checked. Then I want the location. Then for Q1, I want to sort by the conditional formatting icon. So this is on top. That means the best ones are up top. Now if you look, it's sorted by location. And then for Bay City, you've got an up arrow and then a medium arrow. And if you look through those, they're all sorted correctly now. Now for the next step, I want to know if any of the quarters are below $10,000. Looks like the Chesterville one, the Esterville one, and this Hammond one all have a value in Q1, 2, 3, or 4 that's less than $10,000. How can I automatically just filter by that? Now, if you read in the book in section 4, it talks about this, and it gives you an example of if all 4 of those are true. So if Q1 and Q2 and Q3 are all under 10,000 and Q4, put them in the same row. But if they're or, you have to put them in separate rows like this. So now let's invoke the advanced filter. The list range is correct. We want A4 through G20. But the criteria range was still set for when it was an AND function. But now it's an OR, so we have to widen it out for all those additional rows. Now we can either filter it in place or copy to another location. Now the question becomes, it starts in I4, but how many columns do we need to go out? Looks like 7 quarters, and we currently only have 5 quarters in there. So widen this out to 7 columns and hit OK. And now we get those exact same 3 rows that I mentioned before that meet that criteria of anything under $10,000 in quarters 1, 2, 3, or 4. This advanced filter is a really powerful tool that's pretty new in Excel. Oh, and then you got to auto fit that column K for the contents. Now we're up to step 6. Apply a custom number filter to the main data set to only show stores with a profit greater than $55,000 in Q4. So to do this, now I'm going to apply the filter to that big grid of data. So I'm going to highlight all these cells and click on filter. And now click on the 4th quarter I want number filters down here, greater than, and I think it's $55,000. So hit OK. And now we have just got those rows that have a quarter four greater than $55,000. All right, next step, the data in the pivot table is a little old. Anytime you create a pivot table, which we'll talk about here in Module 7, if you change the underlying data, the pivot table doesn't recognize that the data is actually changed. So anytime your data changes, you have to come in here and refresh your pivot table, or else it's pointing to old, obsolete data. So you'll have to do this a few times in the next few weeks. All right, so we want to insert a filter on performance status and just click the below average button, and you can put the slicer anywhere you like. All right, and we want style 8 for the chart, the pivot chart. That looks good. All right, step 10, conditional formatting rules have been applied to the data on the financial targets worksheet to highlight the 2 lowest values for each quarter. However, the values for quarter 4 aren't highlighted. Use the conditional formatting rules manager to fix the problem. So let's go to the right page. And you see how columns C, D, and E have some special formatting on them, but not in quarter 4 or column F. So let's fix this. Go to Conditional Formatting, Manage Rules. Now, the current selection only has a couple things, but the entire worksheet has 4 of them. Here we have 2 for column E, 1 for D, and 1 for C. So this top one needs to be changed from E8 to E23 to F8 through F23. So you got to click in the right spot and then backspace and overtype the E to the F. There, now we have the right formatting in all 4 of the quarter columns. All right, so the next thing we need to do is to do a scenario manager, and they've already built the scenario, so this is really pretty easy. All you have to do is click on the scenario summary, generate the report, and hit OK. And as long as you generate the report, that's all you have to do for the quiz. In fact, you can actually delete that page now. I'll delete it here in a few minutes at the end when I go to clean up all my mess here. All right, so now we're going to do a solver problem. And this is really Module 9 stuff, so I don't expect you to know it. And I'm not a real big fan of this particular exercise, but I like the preceding steps, so I thought that I would go ahead and, since they don't let me pick and choose what steps I want out of a given quiz, I'm going to leave it in here, but I'm going to show you how to do it. And if you can do it, get the few extra points, that's fine. If not, I'm going to give everybody 5 points if they get a score greater or equal to 5 in the first place. So here we have a bunch of different locations with the quarter scores and an average quarterly target. And there are some locations that have a very low score for some of the quarters. And we want to set up a solver model to bring those values up to a certain value. And it's going to involve us setting up a bunch of solver parameters. So first off, we have to enable solver on our machine. So if you go to options and then add-ins, and then up above, you'll see I already have the solver add-in installed, but you may not. So just click on manage and then click on this solver add-in and hit OK. And now if you go to the data tab, you'll see solver out there on the right. So make sure you click on cell G24 before starting. And even at that, you may get this error. So in the first cell, just set the objective to G24. And then we want to maximize our quarterly total revenue. And then it says to put all the changing cells in here that are, let's see, it says to put in C10 and C15 and then D15 and D19, separate these by commas, E15 and 19, and then F10 and 19. And then it says to delete all these existing constraints because they're messed up, and I guess they want you to practice deleting constraints. I'm not really sure, but that's what you got to do. So let's go through and do it. All right. Now it says for each quarter, the value of the two variable cells for that quarter must be equal to each other. This requires a total of 4 constraints. So click here and add, and then just say C10 equals C15, and then hit the add button, and then D15 equals D19, add, E15 equals E19, add, and finally F10 equals F19, and hit OK. So there's those 4 constraints. Now the next step in step 12 says none of the changing cells can have a value greater than half the average for that location. This requires a total of 8 constraints, one for each variable cell where the value is less than or equal to the value of that the average cell for that divided by 2. I know, convoluted. Not sure what they're trying to prove here, but we're going to do it. We're going to slug through it. So click on the first changing cell and say less than or equal to that average for that row, and then divide by 2. Click add and do the next one. All right, so click on C15 less than or equal to G15 divided by 2. Click on the next one. D15 less than or equal to G15 divided by 2. Add. What's the next one? D19 less than or equal to G19 divided by 2. All right, we're up at the column E. So E15 less than or equal to its average divided by 2. E19 divided by less than or equal to G19 divided by 2. Finally, column F, F10 divided by 2. And last and least, G19, F19 less than or equal to G19 divided by 2. Hit OK. Here's our constraints window. If I count, I should have 12 constraints. Trust me that they're all right. Uncheck that box as a general rule of thumb. And then hit solve. And let's see if we got an answer. Oh, looks like we got an answer because it did stuff. And then we know for sure whether or not we got an answer if it generated an answer report. Notice also it says solver found a solution. All constraints are satisfied. So awesome. Now let's go back into it, and I forgot to generate the scenario report. So come back in here, and now let's say save scenario. Click on that. Little window pops up. Give it the scenario name. Solver results. Hit OK. Hit OK to close that. Now let's clean it up. We don't need this answer report. I accidentally made that. It's kind of cool, but it's not going to ask for it. So now we want to generate the solver report and do a scenario summary, and it generates us a new page called scenario summary, but we already have one called that. And I'm going to delete that one from before because we need one for the solver report. So take out that 2. So it just says scenario summary. And then the answer report, delete that. So now we just have the 4 tabs. And okay, let's save the file. I think it's in my downloads directory. That's fine. Just leave it there. Save it, close it. Let's go to upload. Upload my file. And there we go. We got an 11. All right, so that's it for this quiz. And again, As long as you get an attempt that's greater than 5, I'll add 5 points to your quiz score. And if you do get all 10, you'll still get 5 more points. So you'll end up with 15 if you get a perfect score on this. So go for it. I'm always a big fan of extra credit. So thanks a lot, and go Knowles.